for doing erotic art, kind of condemned for doing the same thing. And it it was a weird time, and I just felt this growing desire for more books like that, for more books that had both character, story, and erotic elements. You see.
And we're here with a creator who I've been dying to talk to since we met at Exotica. We're here with Pat Shand of Space Between Entertainment. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well tonight. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, one of the things that in our brief conversation, especially checking out some of your comics and doing some more research after the fact, is one of the things I've seen just maybe in the past couple years, maybe not an explosion of erotica or NSFW comics, so to speak, but I'll say an explosion of them where it's about storytelling, not
Yeah.
just the erotic, sexy part of it. And I think that, especially in you and I seem like we're about of a certain age, especially like those comics we happen to see maybe in our uncle's room when we were kids or things of that nature were very much about, or even say Playboy comics, like they were very much about the sexual side of things, not so much about using that to tell a story. How did you come about maybe going into the NSFW side of things as far as your comics concerned? I know it's not all you do, but I'm curious about that one.
Right. I mean, it is a big part of what I do. It's a thing that I think about a lot because, um, in the 2010s, there was definitely a growing fear of doing this kind of work.
Right.
You would see covers by artists who used to be celebrated for doing erotic art, kind of condemned for doing the same thing. And it it was a weird time, and I just felt this growing desire for more books like that, for more books that had both character, story, and erotic elements. You
Hmm.
see in prose and novels, the leading genre is romance,
Right.
and those books aren't. I mean, you don't open page one and it's pornographic. There's character, there's build up, there's a specific angle that is interesting to female readers,
Hmm.
and that was definitely lacking in comics. It was lacking in comics in the past as well, but I feel like the 2010s really scared people away from doing books like that. Except a few creators like Stepan Sejic on Sunstone, and
Hmm.
the creators of things like, Smut Peddler, Oh Joy Sex Toy, that kind of stuff was really the last remaining strand, to my memory, of erotic books that went beyond just pornographic in that era. So I, I felt that my readers and readers in general wanted more of that, and they wanted erotica and stories about sex to be treated without shame and with the same quality toward character, dialogue, theme as everything else. And I would only want to write it if it was like that, because that's what I want to read. I want any genre, no matter if it's erotic, pornographic, or if it's just action or comedy. To me, the character and the theme should be the focal point, or then
Yes.
it's not really just a story. It's just a means to deliver erotica, which I didn't
Right.
want.
Right. And that makes sense. Now, I love that idea. And you're talking about the 2010s. I think about Sex Criminals when that came out and getting that book. And me personally, while obviously that wasn't anything, it was like very, I mean, it was NFSW for certain aspect of it, but it wasn't say explicit. But
Right.
even with that book, the use of sex and sexuality, while the story was fantastical, it was still used to tell the story and wasn't what the main story was all about. And that is one of the things I think that, and especially something you're really hitting on, a lot of times, and I'll say this personally, I pretty much loathe sex scenes in most mass media
Yeah.
because for the most part, in my opinion, it's kind of just there. It's not used to tell a story, or there's no sort of natural confluence to that point. It's like, okay, yeah, we do have some nudity and a sex scene just because yeah, we want this to happen, but it's usually not tastefully done, and most of the time, you don't need it as far as the story is concerned. So when you talk about your books, and how that's part of the whole, but that's not like the main reason for it. That's something that really intrigues me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it has to be it being a sex scene. A sex
Mhm.
scene, whether it be in erotica or in, as you were saying, mainstream work, it should have a reason to be there. The same as any scene that has violence, profanity, the same reason as scene that you're eating breakfast. There has
Right.
to be utility to the scene. It has to show character. It has to push the narrative forward. And if it doesn't, if it's just checking a box to be like, we're a movie that delivers nudity, that to me, on the creative side, I shouldn't even say creative. That can kind of come down from network. It can come from any direction. It's just a more cynical thing. It's putting something in there to make the movie into a different kind of product.
Right.
And that, I think, I mean, it's not just you. It stands out to people as, you know, useless, random,
Yeah.
and it makes the movie uncomfortable to watch with your parents, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't see it as different than, like, say, a scene where the guy's walking a dog. If it's a random scene where he's walking the dog and nothing happens, you leave the scene thinking, "Oh, that what was that?"
Right.
Eh, But if it's sex, there's also just this, our culture has a bit of a sensitivity toward it that I hope that we're pushing past, but it just stands out more when a sex scene is just clearly shoved in there and
Hmm.
has no narrative or character purpose.
Right. Exactly. Now, what was some of your inspirations just to become or to create comics in the first place?
To create comics in the first place, the truth is that I'm a writer, period. I will
Hmm.
write any medium, and I will write in any media. Like, I as a child, I would read R.L. Stein's Goosebumps. I wanted to write novels. I would continue those books with little short stories. Um, as I got older, I would begin to be like, oh, this TV show, obviously there's a writer. Someone has that job. I could do that. There's I always tell this story that I was in my 20s and I went to this amusement park, and this guy that I know, Brian Lynch, he was one of the first writers in comics who ended up giving me a chance
Hmm.
and sort of helping introduce me to some artists and just talking to me, really. He ended up writing the Minions movie, the Despicable Me spinoff. And I went to Universal Studios in California, I think it was, and I went on this Despicable Me ride. And as I was in the ride, you hear the characters' voices, and I could hear his writing style in
Hmm.
the narrative, in the voiceover, in this chamber on the ride. So I went to our mutual friend, this guy Scott, and I was like, "Did Brian write that ride?" And he said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Wow, yeah." Not only someone writes that ride, someone that I know got that gig to write that ride. There's writers everywhere. So anything that I want to push into, it's feasible. I could do it. So I've tried novels, short stories, theater, and comics, and I have had success in many of these fields. But comics is the one that has stuck so far. But I don't see myself as just a comics purist. I am still thinking about and planning to write in all mediums.
Okay. I like that, and I think a lot of times the ride aspect that you brought up, as someone who's going to many amusement parks, I never thought about, hey, somebody had to write this.
Right.
Somebody, wrote the dialogue that, even though regardless if it's on a loop, somebody wrote this. Somebody came up with the whole story of this ride. And that's something I never thought about before. And that's interesting and fascinating. And then, like you said, something you could possibly do at all many aspects as far as where writing can take you, and that's amazing when you really think about it. I don't think most people, like, I like to write myself every now and again, but I never looked at it in that aspect as far as what sort of doors or what sort of opportunities are actually there for you. I think most of us, when we think writing, we think, oh, we just write this story, we write this poem, we write the screenplay, and you don't think about all the other myriad of properties where a writer pretty much and a writer and a writing is pretty much the backbone and everything else that comes afterwards.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting field, and there's so much you could do. There's There is success on the corporate side of things, on the creative side. There's just so much that you could do as a writer that, I mean, sometimes family or friends will come to me for advice because they'll see my success as sort of like an outlier, and they have like maybe a son, a daughter, a cousin they want me to talk to and sort of explain to them how hard it is to get work, how it's going to be such an upward hill. um and I don't want to do that. I don't think that's right. I think that there's more in this field for people who are actively trying and looking than you could ever imagine. So my advice for people who want to write is to give it a try. It's definitely it's a test of talent for sure.
Mhm.
How much you can hone that talent into a skill, but most of all, it is a test of how dedicated you are and how much of a hard worker you are.
Nice, nice. And now, when we met, I believe you said that your Destiny New York property is being turned into some sort of, I don't remember, the movie, a series by Sony Pictures, is
Yeah,
entertainment. Is that correct?
that's correct. It's going to be a TV series. It's being produced by Tegan and Sarah Quinn.
Okay.
They recently did their high school show for Hulu, and that got them an overall production deal.
Nice.
They're a great band as well. They're my favorite band. When I got a call from my rep that they were producing Destiny New York, he was like, "Have you heard of them?" I was like, "I've been to more of their concerts than most other acts that I follow." So that in general is really cool, and they've been great. It remains to be seen how quickly it's going to happen. It's one of those things where it is optioned, it's being produced, talked about. There's a showrunner, I believe,
Hmm.
and but it's all slow.
Yeah.
Hollywood is kind of just getting back in the swing here
Right.
after the big strike.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fingers crossed. It's one of those things where, um, Hollywood is always a gamble. It's just you have to enjoy and be excited about every step forward.
Hmm.
So right now, the fact that it's on and Tegan and Sarah are dedicated to making it happen, that to me is a big win, and I'm very happy with them as the team behind it.
And what is Destiny New York about?
That follows a girl who had a prophecy made about her when she was young, and she completes her destiny when she's just 13. So now, when we meet her, she's in her 30s, trying to figure out life after destiny. And she ends up in a relationship with a woman who is the last surviving member of the mystical mafia. So it's sort of like an adult Harry Potter meets The Sopranos.
That sounds so cool.
Oh,
That
thank you.
sounds so cool. Oh man, okay. Another, yeah, right now at the time of this recording, you have two Kickstarters that have been fully funded, but you have the number three of I Summon Cthulhu, as well as your, was it Cheeky Comics annual for 2024. Tell me about I Summon Cthulhu.
All right, that is I picture it as sort of like the movie This Is the End, where it has Seth Rogen playing Seth Rogen, Jonah Hill playing Jonah Hill. It's like that for the comics industry. It follows a writer who is myself, and all the other characters are all established creators. Um, it follows these creatives as they pledge their souls to dark gods in exchange for success in the comics industry, and they're led into this apocalyptic situation because of greed, and all the gods also represent trends in comics. So Cthulhu represents horror. The waifu goddess represents, the sexy cover trend.
Hmm.
And there's all these different dark gods that represent these trends and have writers as their avatars. So it's this comedy, but at its core, it's also about this need that writers have to be seen, to be heard, and the compromises that we make along the way.
Okay, now correct me if I'm wrong. Cheeky Comics is more of a imprint or subprint of the main brand. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So the main line is Space Between Entertainment, and everything else is under that. So Cheeky Comics is it's still Space Between. Those books still have our main logo as well, but
Right.
it's an imprint, a line where you can expect erotica from these books. So
Okay.
we did 3 books called Thirsty, Cheeky, and Steamy on the main line, but
Hmm.
I wanted to create a distinction. So, you know, we have a book called Amorini Amateur Cupid on Cheeky Comics. That is a not safe for work book, but the art style is a bit cartoonier. So I wanted to create an obvious distinction so people will know that each of these books are erotica going in without me having to explain it every time.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. That makes sense. Now, being a writer, um, how hard, especially in the beginning, I'm pretty sure maybe now is a bit easier, but how hard was it to really form your team together as far as to produce a comic book in the beginning?
To form the creative teams, I'll tell you this: the difficulty doesn't go away. It comes up at random points. Like I I've gotten, I'm producing a lot more titles now, so it's
Mhm.
gotten easier and people can just see what I've done and know that I'm legit. In the past, I had to, prove myself a bit more and, sort of offer more upfront to creators who I wanted to work with to show that I'm serious because, if someone has no gigs, it's not going to be an equal collaboration if you're an established professional,
Right.
um, but at this point, the difficulty isn't proving myself. The difficulty is just, finding the right team.
Mhm.
There was just a title right now, actually, Countless Little Deaths on Cheeky Comics Annual 2024. Booking that series, because it starts as a short in the annual, it's been
Mhm.
its own series. So that alone, just the structure where we needed someone to do the short soon, and then hopefully have the same artist stay on for the whole series.
Right.
That in general creates a difficulty in booking, but it goes beyond that when you bring in, the erotic elements into it. There are artists who I've spoken to who, you'll offer them a gig and you'll say, yeah, this is not safe for work, that there's erotic elements, and they'll agree thinking that it's like subtle. But in
Right.
cheeky comics, it's blatant, so they'll read the
Right.
script and be like, well, I can't do this, So sometimes there's a false start in that way. And
Mhm.
and other times, you have great long-term collaborations where you click with an artist and then you keep the title going, where they, bring new eyes to you as well.
Right.
So yeah, each title is its own, has its own joys and difficulties for sure.
Okay. I I think just one of the things as far as when I've met artists, I think I've met to interact with a lot more, maybe those who do it all, artists and writers. So a lot of times they're doing everything on their own. And then creators I've interviewed, they've kind of like their artist is somebody they've known. And looking at the sort of output you have, especially with the multitude of books, you definitely can't know everybody, so to speak. Um, so I was very curious about that because, like you said, you've had some good success, some longevity, but more importantly, the differentiation in the books that you put out as well definitely call for different artists and like I said, different commitments as far as that's concerned. So I was very curious about that. So let me ask you: are you reading any comics, or is it just all writing for you at the moment?
It's a lot of writing. I do try
Mhm.
to read here and there. I actually last night, a friend of mine, Richard Farragray, he's a great writer artist. He showed me something early of his that I really loved. But he has a few series that are out right now. There's the Ex-Wives of Frankenstein that's on Kickstarter last year, and issue 2 is coming back this year.
Okay.
That's always a good one. My favorite writer artist is Terry Moore. His stuff is just incredible. I have a hardcover waiting to be read of Serial, which is the spinoff of Rachel Rising, which was a great long run of his. Um, and also, I'm a big fan of Brian K. Vaughan. Saga is finally back, but I, a few volumes into Saga, because I was reading it in single issues, I
Hmm.
was like, I love this, but I know it's going to be a long-term series, which is my preference. And all of his previous stuff I've read in, but by the time it's done, I read
Right.
Ex Machina, Why the Last Man, all that way. But when I read Why, I was finishing volume 9 as volume 10 came out, and that was so exciting. So I decided to read those longer term series as they're collected in trade. But yeah, there's writers and artists that I always check on. I just not the longest pull list right now, just because I am really on the grindstone with this stuff.
Understood. And so, like I myself, since I've kind of went even more headfirst into the whole YouTube thing, it's
Yeah.
a lot of content creation, and with obligations and the real job and everything. My pull list is very short, but you bring up something I wanted to ask you about. I brought up you have 2 books right now on Kickstarter that are fully funded. You still got a couple of days to go. How has Kickstarter impacted the growing of your fan base?
Oh, immensely. It's an interesting thing because while there is some overlap, of course, between Kickstarter and the direct market,
Hmm.
man, when people who read my stuff that comes out in comic shops come to my table and see, like, for example, Destiny New York, Black Mask Studios licenses that, and they are about 10 or so, maybe like 12 issues deep in the single issues. And in the publishings that I do through Space Between, we are 5 full volumes deep, which would amount to like 40 issues.
Hmm.
So when people who read the single issues come to my table and see that kind of stuff, they see you have 5 volumes. How? They're shocked because the Kickstarter stuff is unfamiliar to them. So with
Hmm.
Kickstarter, I'm finding an entirely different and powerful readership that isn't really in the comic stores. They're happy to form a direct relationship with you. And yeah, no, it's been transformative. I've had success in the comic shop through companies like Zetascope. I pair with for a long time and still write for them sometimes here and there. I'm on their Van Helsing ongoing title, and they're great. A lot of my direct market success comes from my work there, but I've also done stuff for like Boom, Avatar, across the board. But it's the Kickstarter stuff now that has been totally transformative to me. And I'm actually kind of trying to push more of these publishers toward Kickstarter. I'll have conversations with the editors who I worked with in the direct market, and they see what I'm doing here on Kickstarter, and they'll go, how is that possible? And I like to help them, because to me, the more success that is on Kickstarter, the more that you bring in someone who's doing well out there and bring them over here, they're going to boost the platform and bring more eyes to the platform. So I'm very intent on growing Kickstarter and growing our brand within Kickstarter, because it's been such a fruitful endeavor for us all.
I'm 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 glad to hear that, and I asked that question, one, because you clearly had success, but two, as someone who has backed comics on Kickstarters, and I know that especially with a couple of creators, again, some people I met before they actually put out a Kickstarter that I purchased from, uh, but you come back because then you are, as a consumer, it's like, this is a really good book, this is well worth my money, I'm going to come back and support. And it seems like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, especially with you have 2 Kickstarters that are fully funded, well past your goals at the moment. It seems like that's something that's definitely happening with the books that you're putting out. Is that a correct assessment?
Yeah, I mean, it's my favorite thing to do is to make these books directly for the people who want them.
Mhm.
For sure, for sure.
Okay, I like that, and I think that I've seen a lot of things on Kickstarter over the years. It's hard to believe it's been out so long now, but comics seem, in general, just seem to do really well, and that is one thing. As someone who's read comics all my life, I really love the platform of Kickstarter being able to give creators who may not end up in a comic store, I would say the comic racks, where they really don't exist anymore, outside of random stuff in Walmart and the supermarket, but really would never end up in a comic store because they get crowded out by other big publishers, and
Right.
being able to go direct to the consumer. I think with most media, that direct to consumer market has really been transformative.
I couldn't agree more. I remember. I was at New York Comic Con, I believe, a year and a half ago, and I did a panel on Kickstarter on comics in Kickstarter,
Mhm.
and the Kickstarter rep, I believe, said that the comics brand is the fastest growing on the platform and also has the highest success rate of all types of publications on Kickstarter.
That really, that doesn't surprise me because even I was looking at both your Kickstarters early, and I think I don't remember both or just one is delivery in May and they close in February. It's a pretty good turnaround considering other segments of Kickstarter, and there's so many horror stories on Kickstarter of uh, people putting their money and things never should. I remember distinctly. Must have been like 2012, 2013. It was very early on. I was a big Windows Phone guy. I love Windows Phone, Windows Mobile, and I remember this is right after Pebble launched with their smartwatch, and somebody had this smartwatch that would work with Windows Phone called the Agent, and I just remember like, oh, I was excited. I never backed it. But I remember just looking into it. Oh, it was cool, it was exciting, and then technology moved really, really fast, and that's just a piece of hardware that never materialized. And there were so many stories and so many different segments like that. But you never hear about something. I've never heard anything like that. Not saying it doesn't happen, but for the most part, comics are very reliable with regards to when they get backed, if they get funded, they usually come out in a time frame that they say they're going to. In my experience, comic creators are very good as far as communicating with their audience as well. And many of the Kickstarters I've been in, it's constant communication as to what's going on. These have gone out. These have gone out. Even there's sometimes I remember one, and probably because I know this person directly, like my book did when I'm like, hey, did anything happen? It's like, oh, I'm so sorry, boom, and then she sent me something a little extra, just because of the mix up. Those are sort of things that I really enjoy about the Kickstarter space and in comics in general, and seeing so many people who now are going to Kickstarter and using whether it's social media or just their connections, say, hey, this we have this Kickstarter. And one thing about a lot of comics Kickstarters, their ceiling isn't that high, so it seems to be from someone who's going to put in my money, like, oh, my $20 is going, or $28 or $40, whatever, how much it is. Like that's really going to make a difference toward their goal compared to, say, on the flip side, some of the tech stuff where it's like, oh, we need, 100K or 200K, like that. Like you as a consumer, you're like, are there really enough people who are going to chip in for this,
Yeah,
even at $100 a pop? Like that's still a lot of money. But 650 or $6,500, like, okay, my $20 gonna make a dent. Like this is doable. This will happen. And I
right.
think that's a lot of what we look at when we look at comic Kickstarters. Okay, this is a cool idea. I'm gonna plunk down my money, and I have a really good shot of this coming out in the time it's supposed to.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a big part of why comics do so well. And I think that, there's the tech stuff is cool. That is definitely offering something with utility,
Mhm.
but with Kickstarter, people become invested in the journey of the creator,
Right.
because they're actually the product that they'll read and emotionally respond to. They're communicating directly with the person who made that, and that's a
Right.
more personal connection, I feel.
Yes. Yes. And I like that you put the journey of the creator on. I was looking at your Kickstarter videos. I believe it was for I think it was for I Summon Cthulhu.
Yeah,
I was liking how you had the aspects of the comic, but then also the journey as well. And for me, I really enjoy that. I always enjoy behind the scenes stuff when it comes to creators, that creative process, and how people come up with the ideas for their books, and then even the journey to that book from the idea to assembling a team to actual creation and publication. And then I can sit here and read it in my hands. And I love that, whether it's comics or movies or music, the creative process is so fascinating to me. And you're right, Kickstarter really um, pulls back the curtain, so to speak, on a creative process for those of us who just love comics, and I love that so much.
yeah, no, it's great. It is very exciting to be on the platform as a creator. I love that connection just as much as a reader would, you know. So
Mhm.
that's part of the reason why I keep going back, you know. So yeah, I love it.
Now, right now, like I said, you have I Summon Cthulhu and Cheeky Comics Annual 2024. What's next after those?
Right. So we have a merch campaign that's launching next week. That's going to be for Destiny New York. It's going to be Kickstarter does this thing in January called Make 100, where you make 100 of a limited item. It's going to be a special print that you can, you know, add a bunch of stuff onto if you want. But if you just want the print, you can get that. And then after that campaign concludes, we're going to do Emerald Fantasies, which is the Space Between annual. That's going to include stories from Destiny New York, Gangster Asperista, and a new series called Wild Wisps. That's launching early February. And next on Cheeky Comics is going to be Private Dance #2,
Okay.
February.
Now, let me ask you this question because I have one more after this, but I just thought is one of the things I've noticed about your books is how could I put this? The realistic way the characters are depicted, especially in these sort of fantastical sort of circumstances. And also, you know, we're going back to the erotic part, like the realism involved in that. How important to you is it to really write and create fleshed out characters in all aspects?
Oh, it's so important, you know, because it's what I love in the stories that I enjoy most. You know, I think about character interactions all the time. My favorite shows, my favorite movies, my favorite books are things that I'll revisit over and over, and not to be like, oh, I want to see how they got from point A to point B again. No, I want to be with the characters again. You know, I want to live a little life with them. And that's what I want people to experience with my books. I want them to want to be with these people. That they want to uh, you know, enjoy them or hate them or just experience them again.
Okay. I I'm glad. Well, I like that, and I think one of the things that I've been noticing recently, not so much comics. I've never had that. At least the comics I read, I'll put it that way. I've never had that much of an issue where I just said, you know, that's not a realistic conversation. Uh,
Right.
some of the things I've watched recently, media, because I don't sit down and watch too many series too often anymore, just with my time and everything. But I ended up watching like the Doctor Who specials, and one of the things, especially certain situations that came up, I was really impressed how some of the dialogue. Okay, that is what a mom would say in this situation. That is what a mom would say about her child and the aspects of her. Like that was real, and I was really impressed. Like that's one like a recent example. I'm always impressed when I hear dialogue or see dialogue in fictional characters that I believe they would actually say if this was a real situation. And I think I see more and more of that now, but that is not something, in my opinion, that is, I gotta put it, that's not the standard. And so I really appreciate it when writers really, even these fictional make believe weird ass situations, they really write to make these characters as real and as grounded as possible. And I think a lot of that, and I'm sure a testament to just the success you had, that's something that your readers get from your books as well. Like it's grounded and it just makes the story that much more interesting to read.
That's what I want, you know, because as as into the fantasy as some of these books get, it feels more real. It feels more in the moment, vital when you can believe the characters are real. You know, it doesn't matter what's happening around them. If you believe the people, you'll believe the story.
Right. Exactly. I love now, Pat. Where can everybody find your books? Because you got a lot of different places they can go right now.
Yeah, I'm at Pat Shand. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all that stuff, and on Kickstarter. Um, just the Cheeky Annual is tinyurl.com/Cheeky Annual 2024, and I Summon Cthulhu is tinyurl.com/Cthulhu Finale. But also, you just go to the comics section, just scroll a bit, you'll find me for sure. I'm always on the platform, and if you want more from me, I'm going to be announcing my new newsletter through Twitter soon, so just follow me on Twitter at Patch Day.
What about your Etsy? Can everything be found there as well?
A good amount, yeah. It's
Yeah.
Space Between Comics on Etsy is the store, and we're adding more to that every day. Well, not every day, but hopefully soon we'll be adding to that every day. We're updating in waves right now until all our backlog is there, and then as we sell through the Kickstarter stock, we'll be putting the remainder on there as well.
Okay, cool. Now you guys should have seen all that flash below. If not, look in the comments. Pat, thank you very much for your time. I wish you even greater success with everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
You guys, Webster Style, you know where you are. Thank you for your time. We out.